Deebo Samuel has fluid in his lungs. He has pneumonia and he's in the hospital. We'll break down what that means for the 49ers going forward next on Cohn and Krueger. Good afternoon. That's Larry Krueger. I'm Grant Cohn. Kyle Shanahan just had his post-day after conference call and revealed that the illness that kept Deebo Samuel out of yesterday's game is what he called technically pneumonia. He has fluid in his lungs. He went to the hospital last night, and there's no timetable for his return. They're going to have to see how he recovers. Pneumonia can take a week or two to recover from, and it can have lingering effects for weeks, maybe months. What is your reaction to this news?
Well, it's very serious. And I will say the people who were kind of questioning if he was sick, what's he doing on the sidelines? If he's sick, why is he standing around all the other players? What was he doing there yesterday? So to me, this kind of adds credibility to his sickness, period. I mean, there were people that were like, did he get chiefitis and this kind of thing? So that obviously wasn't the case. He obviously is legitimately sick. Pneumonia can be very serious, can be deadly. And it, obviously in older people, it is deadly. So obviously our thoughts and prayers go out to him. As a young, healthy man, Grant, I think he should have no problem, beating this. But you heard Kyle say we don't know about his status for this week. So, it can be very, very serious, but I'm sure, somebody in the prime of life, young man like Deebo, they'll be able to give him antibiotics and get that fluid out of his lungs. But if you told me he was going to be in the hospital till like Wednesday, that wouldn't surprise me at all.
Yeah, this seems pretty serious. Again, it's not life-threatening, but it's not necessarily something that he could come back from in a week. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't play against the Cowboys and then has the bye week, and then they see where he's at coming back after that. He could come back maybe the same week as Christian McCaffrey if McCaffrey does come back. But yeah, I mean, it seems like he tried to play through it in this game. It didn't work, and it would seem to be aggressive to go back out there again. Also, I don't know. I think there are maybe different kinds of pneumonia, but some pneumonias are contagious, so maybe he shouldn't be playing right now.
Well, I mean, he's been hugely disappointing, in my opinion. Now, maybe other people don't share that opinion. I don't know. I haven't talked to you about how you feel about the year that he's having, but he's played 6 games. He's had 19 carries for 51 yards. That's 2.7 yards per carry. He's averaging 8.5 yards a game as a rusher. So he's not doing it as a runner. As a receiver, he's got 20 receptions on let's see how many targets. He's got 20 receptions, 22 on 32 targets, which is also not a great number. 335 yards, 16.8 average, and 1 touchdown. He's the key stat to me, Grant, the one that I just was like, whoa. The guy has broken 2 tackles. 2, as in there's 2 people on the stream. He's broken 2 tackles. So that's not the Deebo that I remember. What has happened to Deebo Samuel as a runner?
Also, like 20% of his receiving production this year came on 1 play on a busted coverage against the Seahawks. So it's not like he's having a dominant season by any stretch. He's getting older. I mean, I think players who make their money breaking tackles don't last much beyond 29. I mean, look at Rob Gronkowski's career. You just end up getting hurt a lot. Deebo Samuel gets hurt a lot. This has nothing to do with that. But it seems like if you want to, I mean, look at George Kittle. He's entering that phase of his career where he doesn't break a lot of tackles anymore. He used to when he was 26. Now he's 31 and he's trying to extend his career. And he's still a really good player because he's a red zone target and all of that. But like Deebo isn't even that. So now you're starting to wonder, like, how do you use him?
Well, and you quickly start to look around, okay? Look around the room and tell me who that touches the football for the 49ers. That's dynamic. Jordan Mason, he can be. Deebo, no. Juice, we won't even bother. Patrick Taylor, no. Jawan Jennings, no. George Kittle, a little bit from time to time if he's healthy, but generally no. He's 30. Ayuk out for the year, so now he was potentially dynamic. So what do you got? Who's dynamic that you have right now? Jacob Cowing, has 2 receptions in his NFL career, and Isaac Garendo, who's fumbled, 3 times or whatever. I mean, so those are your dynamic weapons. So to say that there's a myriad of issues, and we can point out a bunch of things, right? But one of them that is a primary is that their weapons are slow, very, very slow group of weapons.
Okay. I got a question for you. Yeah. So Kyle Shanahan mentioned this on the conference call. It's not just Deebo Samuel who's in the hospital. It's not just Brandon Ayuk who's out for the year with an ACL tear and an MCL tear and possibly other stuff that they haven't revealed yet. It's also Jawan Jennings has a hip injury and they haven't said much about it, and they don't know if he's going to play this week. And Chris Conley has an ankle injury and they don't know if he's going to play this week. So that's 4 wide receivers whose status are in question. Will the 49ers trade for a wide receiver before the deadline?
He didn't sound very encouraged. I mean, he was asked about, hey, is there a trade deadline thing that could help? And he's like, hey, we'll look at everything, but, we don't want to. It doesn't sound like they want to pay a big price. I don't know what kind of budget Jed has on them, or what kind of marching orders they have for the season. Was he told, okay, we'll sign all these guys you want to sign, but we're not taking on any money mid-season? I don't know. Jed easily could have said that, and
or Denise.
So yeah, or Denise or John. We don't know what their marching orders are because we're kind of been kept out of the loop on that in that regard. But he said, hey, we'll look at everything, and if it makes sense, we'll do it. But it doesn't, it doesn't sound very encouraging. And when people go through the names, and I saw some of the names, and you've read all the names too. Cooper Kupp. I mean, are the Rams really going to trade you Cooper Kupp? Probably not. DeAndre Hopkins is older. T. Higgins, the Bengals never make trades. People have thrown out Dontavion Wicks. Gutekunst is not going to help the Niners if he's smart at all. Then there's other guys like Tutu Atwell, which who knows? You might be able to get Tutu away from the Rams. He's not a star. Darius Slayton, is he going to help you? Cortland Sutton, Deontay Johnson. I mean, all these guys, every one of these guys could potentially help a little. I mean, the name that's intriguing to me is Garrett Wilson, just because that's really what they need. They need a young receiver that can run routes and separate, and they don't have those receivers. They've got old receivers that they're looking to move on from. So, yeah, if the Jets are willing to move Garrett Wilson, if I were the 49ers, I would trade a day 2 pick or a day 1 or 2 pick or some combination of a couple picks to the Jets to get a player like that. But what are the odds that he's even available?
Yeah, at a certain point, you got to wonder when the Yorks put their foot down and say, we've given you, Kyle, a blank check, but it's like, dude, you wanted an extension for Jennings? We did it. You want an extension for Ayuk? We did it, even though we didn't really want to do it. And on and on and on. And then we drafted Ricky Pearsall in the first round and Cowing in the 4th round. Like, if they trade for a wide receiver, I don't expect he'd be expensive. He might have 0 guaranteed money on his contract, playing for the league minimum, something like that, like a body. Like they could, or they would just sign someone like Robbie Chosen
off the street. Yeah,
someone off the street,
or a practice squad guy. Yeah, I mean, you can always go the cheap route. The nice thing about Garrett Wilson is he's on his rookie contract, so you could. But of course, you'd have to pay a heavy price as far as draft picks. But you know what? I'm looking at their first pick in this regime. This is the first pick of this regime: Solomon Thomas, Reuben Foster, Mike McGlinchey, Nick Bosa, which was a great pick, Kinlaw and Ayuk, Trey Lance, Drake Jackson, Jair Brown, and Ricky Pearsall. I don't know. When I see that list, it makes me think maybe I'd be open to trading my high picks.
What did you see from Ricky Pearsall, and how do you feel about him stepping up?
Well, he really is impressive as a person. Like first and foremost, he's totally willing to relive that moment and to go down his feelings and, peel the onion. You know what I mean? I thought he would shut all that talk down, but he's not only not shutting it down, he's kind of like leaning into it a little bit. And like, so in that regard, I found him to be in the post game so refreshing, so open, so willing to discuss something that's so tragic and was such a terrible thing in his life. So on that regard, I really like the guy. But as far as what he did on the field in the game, I mean, he didn't separate at all. Let me see if I have the numbers in front of me. Ricky Pearsall he only averaged like 1.5 yards of separation. It was like one of the worst of the league he averaged 1.9 yards of separation per target. That was the 6th worst of any receiver that played yesterday or played in week 7 or whatever it was. So, I mean, he didn't separate. We were told he was a man beater in coming out in the draft, but in the summer he seemed to struggle to get away from man coverage. So I think he's still very much a work in progress, and more importantly, I don't think they can depend on him right now, despite the fact that he was a first-round pick, despite the fact that he's on the field now. I don't think you can depend on him because he doesn't really get separation, or at least yesterday he didn't get separation.
And he averaged 7 yards a catch. Like, I mean, I think it's important to remember, though, let's not write off Ricky Pearsall for not just because he got shot, but before that, don't forget he missed essentially all but 4 days of training camp. So we saw what that did to Ayuk. That you take a player who's established, what considered the top of his position, and he was having an objectively bad year because he missed training camp and he was going to take time to round into form. Why would Ricky Pearsall be any different? Even if he's really good, I still think it would take him a while to show it. And right now, the rookie who's been here every day in practice, improving 1% every day, is Jacob Cowing, who's currently averaging 25 yards per catch. I feel like he's not necessarily a starter, but he's someone who should be featured in the game plan, a legit weapon, not just as a receiver, but as a gadget guy, jet sweeps. I mean, we saw that with Mecole Hardman yesterday. How come? Where is that in the Niners offense? I think he could bring that to him if Kyle Shanahan called it.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to find out, how they want to utilize Cowing. But I mean, all I'll say is anybody who's in the chat, anybody who's watching this, if anybody's ever played fantasy football, it's pretty rare for rookie receivers to produce. And it's even rarer for them to produce consistently. And so, could he have a good game? Sure. Could Cowing have a bust out game, especially against Dallas if nobody else shows up? Cowing, I think, probably would be a guy that I would probably think would have a big game. But as far as like depending on rookies, I don't really think that you can. So, and I don't think it's a good approach. History tells us that, I mean, even Jerry Rice was really good, like in week 15 of his rookie year, but up till then he struggled. So, it just takes receivers a long time. I asked him, that was the first question I asked him. I said, Ricky, what was it like getting open in the SEC compared to today? And he's like, yeah, it's different. It's different. Every guy that I'm going up against here is like the best guy that I ever went up against in college. So it's a major step up. It's very, very difficult. You can count on one hand, Grant, the number of receivers that hit the ground running in the NFL.
It seems to me the guys who need to step up this season for the season not to be a disaster are, I mean, like you said, like Jacob Cowing isn't going to carry the passing game. And I'm not sure that Ricky Pearsall will either, but Juwan Jennings and George Kittle have to step up. George Kittle's having a hell of a year. Jennings having a hell of a year, but they're going to have to do more. They're going to have to get more targets. And I've been begging to get Juwan Jennings more targets. Here you go. See what you got. You're going to get all the targets you can handle and then some. And he's not even healthy right now, but assuming he comes back from a hip injury sounds bad. They're like, yeah, we're not going to tell you much about it. It's fine. We don't know when he's coming back though. But yeah, it's like, what? And when did this happen? I don't know. Scary.
He took a monster hit on that hip. Was it in the Seattle game or the week before? Maybe he took one monster hit on the hip, and he got up slow, and he's been hurt ever since. So Yeah, but I mean, if it was a broken hip, obviously that's a huge injury. I don't think it's a broken hip, but I'm sure it's very, very painful to run. It's probably the biggest joint in the body is the hip, right? So it's just when you take a big, hard hit on the hip, I mean, it can affect your ability to run for weeks. So I think he'll be back this week. That'll be my guess.
Okay. Corey Soto says, Niner fans, you need to get real. This season is done. There will be no miracle run over before the season started, and Purdy's play will only get worse. All right, that leads me into my next topic. Can Christian McCaffrey save the season? He's not going to play against the Cowboys, but the Niners keep sort of making noises like they're hoping he'll say he's good to go after the bye week. If he is, can he save the season?
No. I mean, if you ask me if I think he's going to save the season, no. A guy with 2 Achilles who's been ridden hard, who hasn't played, and since the Super Bowl and still is not ready to play and might not be ready to play for 3 or 4 more weeks. I mean, literally, if that's what you're banking this season on, wow. I mean, really, we're going to bank on a running back with 2 Achilles injuries to come back and save the season. I will say this, though. Man, the Kyle Shanahan's red zone offense doesn't look like anything without Christian. So I hope he comes back soon.
I mean, Christian McCaffrey, would help if he could stay healthy and be the guy he was last year. Like, obviously, having the offensive player of the year back would be great. I'm not sure that guy exists anymore. I'm not sure if he comes back that he won't have a re-aggravation or something worse that I don't want to speak into existence. And then they have deeper issues that he can't address. He won't help their special teams. He won't help the fact that their defense is kind of soft and gets grounded and pounded by tough running backs in the second half. James Conner, Kareem Hunt. You can't fix
Carson Steele gashed them.
Apparently went to UCLA.
The Niners have I like McCaffrey. He's a really talented player, but I don't know. To me, it seems like the healthier approach would be bank that he's not coming back and let him surprise you. To think that, you're going to tie your hopes to he's going to come back. Wow. I mean, how quickly things have changed in the Niner world if their entire season is tied to a running back who's been ridden hard with 2 Achilles coming back to save the season.
Yeah, and imagine, say the Niners lose to the Cowboys this week. So let's say Deebo doesn't play, Ayuk doesn't play, maybe Jennings doesn't play, maybe they're just decimated and they lose to the Cowboys. They go to the bye week and they turn to Christian and say, Christian, we're 3-5. Our season's going down in flames. Come back, save us. We know you've had no offseason, absolutely zero offseason, and you've been healthy for about 2 weeks. Please carry us to a Super Bowl. That's not even fair to ask.
Nor does anybody believe that he has the ability to do that, to lift this entire team up. He would help, and he would make them more dynamic offensively. But, I mean, I got to think that if he's coming back, they're going to have a small, limited role and a gradual ramp up. So I don't think it's like, hey, he's back. 20 totes, 7 receptions, targeted him, try to get him the ball 30 times. I mean, it's like, that seems like a very, very tall ask, does it not?
It does. And it's like, we know the Niners are being cautious with McCaffrey, but I think it's also fair to assume that McCaffrey's being cautious with McCaffrey. I mean, he's a very high-powered athlete, and he's got his future interests in mind, and he's going to have to decide that he's ready to go as well. It's going to have to be a mutual decision that he's ready to go, and not just ready to go, but how much he's ready to do. Because I don't think he went to freaking Germany to get rushed back and carry the ball 25 times his first game back and tear his Achilles game 1. Like, that's not what he has in mind right now. He's being, I'm not going to say cautious, but I think he's trying to be smart.
To me, when you think about the fact that they extended him, so he's here beyond this year, probably the best plan, and I know nobody's going to want to hear this, but maybe the best plan is to shut CMC and Greenlaw down.
That's sort of where I was going with this. Yeah.
And just say, hey, we love you. You're here. You're a Niner. Let's pack it in and let's because I mean Greenlaw, Greenlaw sounds like you heard Kyle today. He was asked for a timeline on Greenlaw. He's like, well, a couple guys are going to be back in the next few weeks, and Greenlaw's a few weeks beyond that. So what we're talking about is December for a guy who ruptured his Achilles on the field in the Super Bowl on February the 11th. You know what? Why? I mean, let him get healthy. Bring him back next year.
And here's the thing. Like Ayuk, he has a torn ACL, torn MCL. He's not going to be back for week 1 next year. This is going to linger into this. We have no idea when he's coming back. If McCaffrey comes back and it's like the season was already going down the tubes and you try to rush him back to save something that isn't savable, and God forbid he tears an Achilles mid-season, well, then next season is compromised from him too. That's 2 players that you won't have for this year and next year. It's a very serious decision the Niners got to make right now.
Yeah. I mean, I don't fault them for how they handled McCaffrey's injury, because I think the McCaffrey thing kind of came on this year. But I kind of do fault them for how they went about trying to replace Dre Greenlaw. Where's the first-round linebacker? Where's the second-round linebacker? Where's the acknowledgement that Dre Greenlaw and Fred Warner were massive pillars to your defense, and that you couldn't take away a massive pillar to your defense and replace them with, I don't know, Devondre can't cover Campbell? I mean, that to me right there.
To their credit, they did finally bench him and they put D Winters in there, who's better. But I mean, he wasn't perfect out there.
He ran out of bounds on Patrick Mahomes. He gave Mahomes 30 extra yards by running out of bounds.
Dre Greenlaw would have hit Mahomes and got a 15-yard penalty and ejected, but that's a different story.
Dre Greenlaw would have knocked Mahomes out of the game.
Right.
And
himself.
And he would have gotten probably kicked out of the game. But you know what? Instead, that looks a whole lot better than, I don't know, guarding the sideline and letting the quarterback run 30 yards down the field.
Because that's going to be on Patrick Mahomes' Hall of Fame highlight reel, and so will D Winters. Sorry.
Yeah, seriously. That's he just got posterized.
Batman 29 says things have been chaos since they lost the Super Bowl. Losing the Super Bowl has a devastating psychological effect on teams unless they have freaking Tom Brady or someone incredible like that. And that guy is one of one.
Can I complain? And I know it's weak. I know this complaint is going to be weak, but I think it's legitimate. Yesterday, the 49ers were -3 in rest days to Kansas City. This week, they're going to be -7 in rest days to the Cowboys.
Yep.
Why is it okay for the NFL to use the Niners repeatedly in national TV games, and at the same time? So, in other words, you're using the Niners. They're not 1/32 of your trying to market to the fans. They're a bigger part of that because they're in all these national TV games. You're playing them. They're one of your iconic franchises that draw people into your tent. Maybe in the future, they should have a more equitable situation. They have rules that say that you can't be in the facility before, more than a certain, at a certain time on a certain date. And if you don't abide by those rules, they dock you draft choices. So they're docking you draft choices if you have players in your facility even one day more than they should be there. But it's totally cool to have the 49ers have a 41-day less rest deal than the Ravens, and they're competing for the same Super Bowl. If the Niners play the Ravens on Super Bowl Sunday in New Orleans this year, on Super Bowl Sunday, the Ravens will show up with 41 more rest days over a season that's 4 months long. That's beyond equitable or not equitable. That goes to totally, your whole thing is a joke when one team's got, in a sport like football, where 1 day of extra rest is significant in the minds of the coaches, and you're going to give one Super Bowl contender 40 plus 41 on another Super Bowl contender. It's not just, oh, that sucks. That is a major, major drag on the 49ers. And it's been 2 or 3 years in a row that it's happened. And I realized we knew about this months ago, and this is just sour grapes at a point in the season where
very sour.
Where the Niners are now taking on water. But
like
they have a much harder road to the bowl than the Ravens do.
They're not going to the bowl, and they didn't lose to the Kansas City Chiefs because of the rest disadvantage. But I hear you. Slick Rick says, at what point is injuries the excuse? Because at some point you have to be objective and say, this really isn't a true Niners team with half or over half of your intended players not playing.
Injuries are part of the game. I didn't see Isaiah Pacheco out
Thank you.
there.
Took the words out of my
Isaiah
mouth.
Pacheco? Where was Juju Smith-Schuster?
Juju.
Where was Joe Tooney in the Super Bowl? So how come the Mahomes can overcome injuries, but the 49ers cannot?
I think that's a great point. 808 Niner says, can we now say Brock is just a good quarterback and not elite? And should the Niners pay him after this year because he doesn't even look like he's worth it? Larry, don't you start. We're saving that one for the end. Are you kidding? You think I wasn't going to ask Larry that question? 808 Niner, good question. We're going to get there. Denial says, Krug don't cape for Purdy. He ain't it. If he was, he would have hit counting up. Everyone's waiting for me to ask you about Purdy. I'm going to ask Larry about Purdy. Don't worry.
We'll get into it.
I'm going to make you wait. You got to stick around through our Bet US. Charlie St. Clair says, would Larry fire Kyle for Ben Johnson? You're just cutting all to the good stuff right now. Wait a second. Wait for it.
Okay.
Well, William Engelman says, do you think if Purdy had the O-line Patrick Allen and Hurts had, he would be playing like he did last year? Why isn't Kyle invested in the line?
Well, I mean, seriously. I mean, that's a good question. Think about it this way. You are Kyle Shanahan. The basis of your offense is the run game. Or at least it was when they hired him. It was the basis of his offense was the run game, play action pass off of his run game. And now here we are years later, year 8, and it's a total different offense. They're not play action pass. It's downfield passing. It's Purdy out of the gun. It's not the same offense. But I do find it interesting that a team that wants to potentially build their offense around the run game and the play action pass game has spent exactly 3 draft choices since 2017 on day 1 or day 2 on offensive linemen. Pooney this year, Banks, and McGlinchey. That's it. Those are the only investment in the offensive line. 3 picks over 8 drafts. That's not enough.
Not enough. John Muniz says, Larry said the Niners going to the Super Bowl last night. Is this true?
I said they were going to I absolutely did not say they were going to the Super Bowl last night.
Okay. He denies the allegations. Sean O'Leary says, why not just shut down CMC and Greenlaw? That's what Larry said. Keep them healthy for next year. See what we have in some younger receivers and DBs. Get them the reps in a wasted year. Make salary decisions in 2025 with actual observations. This does seem like the season from hell, but if Kyle Shanahan is coaching for his job, if there's actual consequences if they miss the playoffs like he did in 2020, maybe he won't do that. I don't know. I don't know if there's any. I get the feeling there aren't consequences for Kyle, even though there should be. But we'll talk about what Larry thinks about that in a minute. Sean Larry says, dang it, Larry, you beat me to it.
What did I beat him to?
I don't know. That was about
ripping
5 minutes ago. Something Ford says, Tom Coughlin 5-1 against Belichick 2 Super Bowls. Just thanks for that. Beast Mode Gaming says, want to say thank you to both of you. You guys rock. Thank you. Gold Tau says, end of the runner-up dynasty. That's just snarky. Quality over quantity says, don't cry about rest with Kyle. Y'all not winning. Wow. Okay. It's not my team. All right. We got to do some Bet US. It's Bet US time. Number 1 sports book in our hearts. They don't have the Niners betting line out yet. So why don't we check out tonight's game? Yes, I'm done chatting. Thank you very much for your outstanding customer service, as you can see. Baltimore Ravens -4 on the road against Tampa Bay, whose offense is really good. And I believe Tampa's coming off a bye week. Who do you like?
You know what? This is kind of one of the reasons I'm not that enthused about the 49ers' chances. They have Tampa coming off that bye, and nobody thinks anything of that. They're like, oh, yeah, well, we'll beat Tampa, and then no, you won't beat Tampa. Tampa is scoring tons of points, and they have some really good defensive players. Antoine Winfield, Kalijah Cansey, Vita Vea. They've got some big-time players on D, and they're scoring a shit ton of points. So I don't
know why I said they're coming off a bye week. I'm stupid. They played the Saints last week and scored 51 points, to your point.
Yeah, I'll take the Bucks, man. I like the Ravens at home. I go against the Ravens on the road.
Okay, I'm with that. That's interesting. I like the Ravens a lot this year, but they're on a winning streak. But let's see what the Buccaneers can do. They don't even have to win the game. Again, that's how betting works.
And I love the Chargers.
Do you ever bet the money line?
Yeah, I bet money line yesterday. I took.
So the difference is with money line, you're just betting on which team wins the game outright. It's not a point spread.
Right.
But you have different odds.
I took the money line to try to get more money last night because the Steelers were dogs at home to the Jets. And I'm looking at that going, what? I'm taking the Steelers every day.
Then why don't we take the Buccaneers money line?
Yeah. Yeah. I love
that. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Let's do that. Plus 185 for the Buckets. That means if we were to put down,
just Tampa.
If we were to put down $50, we would win potentially we would almost double it if we win. If the Buccaneers win outright.
Yeah.
So
I love Chargers.
That's exciting.
I love Chargers.
Sure. Do you love Chargers by one or?
Yeah. Yes. I like.
Let's do that.
I like the Chargers on the with the spread. The Chargers.
Do you like the Chargers in the rain? Do you like the Chargers in a train?
Yes, I like the Chargers with a hat. I like the Chargers on a mat.
Okay, what do you like about the Chargers? I interrupted you. Sorry.
Well, they get the best defense going. And unlike Kyle Shanahan, and I love Kyle Shanahan, I think Kyle Shanahan's a good coach, but Jim Harbaugh does what Andy Reid does. He hires really, really good coaches all throughout his staff. You know, what's the Niners' problem? Dave Taub is a better coordinator than Schneider. Guess what? Really Spags is a much better coordinator than Sorensen.
True.
What I like about Harbaugh is he brings in great coaches. He brought in that kid Minter as the defensive coordinator. Guess who's number one in football right now in defense? That's right, the Chargers. They give up 12 points a game. So they're doing what they used to do here with Will Tukuafu. Remember Will Tukuafu? They're using a Boise State defensive tackle named Scott Matlock, who's 290-pound ginger. They're using him as a fullback, and he's detonating on people, and they're destroying people in the run game. So I'll take the Chargers on the road.
Love it. Go to BetUS and TV and receive 150% bonus on your first 3 deposits up to $2,000 with code YouTube150. Let me actually place the bets because you can't win unless you place them, and that's so exciting. We're going to win all the money, Larry and I together, teamwork. Okay, Larry, let's get into the juicy part of the show. Who is the most overrated player on the team?
Most overrated player on the team.
I have not prepped Larry for this question. He did not know it was coming. I wanted to spring it on him and see what he would say. This is a team that's 3-4. It's way too talented to be 3-4. I think we need to give someone the title of most overrated right now.
Well, let me see. It's a good one.
I know this is kind of spicy. We got to go into the locker room and face these guys. So if Larry doesn't want to necessarily go there, I understand. But I got a name.
Come on, you know me. The last thing I have is
okay, fair enough.
Like that.
But look, someone's got to be the most overrated.
Yeah, I will say. Well, you got to think about rated though. Like who's highly rated?
Exactly.
So, there's guys that aren't very good, but they aren't highly rated.
Correct.
Most overrated. Well, there's nobody on defense that I think is rated all that high, who's not worth it. I would say Juszczyk because people talk about Hall of Fame, people, all the Pro Bowls. He's in a league where there are not a lot of fullbacks. He's a solid player, but I don't think he doesn't move anybody in the run game as a blocker. He can do all the things. Like I saw him punt at practice the other day, and he looked like a punter. I mean, you would have swore he looked like a punter. So there's certain things that he can really do that other people can't do. But I would say Juszczyk is probably the most overrated 49er. And then after that, it's probably Deebo. Just because Deebo has a big name, and like there are people like just the fact that there are teams around football that are supposedly calling the Niners looking to trade for Deebo tells you right there that he's overrated because he's broken 2 tackles all year. He's nothing as a runner anymore, and he doesn't separate from man coverage. So if there's a market for him, then that tells you that there are other teams around the league that rate him highly. And I would claim they are overrating him based on what I see on a regular basis. So I would say Deebo and Juice would be the guys.
Okay. Those are good ones. I mean, Juice is highly regarded because he's like supposed to be the number 1 fullback, but he's not like a top 100 player in the league. Deebo has been an all-pro. I feel like a lot of people kind of know that he's on the downside of his career. I want to go bigger. I want to get canceled for this take. I'm going to go as big as possible. The most overrated player on the team. Nicholas Bosa. Sorry. He's just not what he used to be. He's 3.5 sacks through 7 games. He's on pace for 8.5 sacks this year. He's not really much of a factor against the run. He's absolutely what his brother turned into for the Chargers. I'm not a bad player, but not $34 million a year. A good player, but not $34 million a year.
He's a very good player on a very forgettable line.
Very forgettable.
I mean, the rest of these guys. I mean, he had 14 pressures in a game the other day. But you know what? I'll go with you on. I'll go with you on that because we're not comparing him to the other Niners.
Correct.
We're comparing him to Myles Garrett. We're comparing him to Aiden Hutchinson. We're comparing him to TJ Watt. And all those guys have a greater consistent impact on the football game, I would say, than Nick. But I do think Nick is an underrated run defender. So I think he's a better run defender than people think. And I don't blame him. I don't think he's regressed dramatically, but I think he's not as impactful as those other guys who are at the top of the food chain at his position. Just not. Okay,
fair enough. That's enough of that. I want to get into Brock now. You were in the locker room after the game. Did you see Kyle and Brock at Brock's locker?
Yes.
Okay.
As Shanahan described, creeping. There were people creeping around behind him. Yes.
Oh, yeah. Before we say what we saw, can we talk about what Kyle said? He was asked about it today. Jennifer Lee Chan asked, and he said, I didn't know the media was there. It was all of the media. He didn't know. He was just talking to. They always talk. We were just talking. Okay. Yeah. All right. But the question was, what were you talking about? And he didn't say. So my question to you, Larry, is what do you think? Let's just do total wild speculation. What do you think Kyle Shanahan was talking to Purdy about?
I really believe that it was probably about what he saw on the last pick. And probably Kyle said to him right there, hey, Brock, you need to take the sack. You need to take the sack. I think it was Karlaftis. I think Karlaftis had beaten McKivitz, and he was in on Purdy, and he forced Purdy to throw the ball. But guess what? You don't have to throw the ball there. The receiver was bracketed. There were defenders on both sides. You needed the field goal there. You needed 2 scores anyway. So guess what? Take the sack and get the field goal and keep the game going. Don't try to make a play there. I think that if I was guessing, that's the play that they were discussing. And he did also talk about it today. Shanahan did mention it today. So I just feel, and I knowing, I don't know Shanahan, but just getting a sense of Shanahan, I get the feeling that the last mistake is the one that's top of mind or the most severe mistake. And to me, that was the first one was he could have thrown 5, by the way. I watched the rewatch again today. Nick Bolton batted that ball into the air. That easily could have been picked. There was another ball that Ayuk got a penalty on McDuffie. That easily could have been picked. I mean, the ball was thrown in harm's way at least 6 or 7 times. And they wound up with 3 picks. But it could have been 4 easy. Could have been 5 easy. So I think the most egregious was the final one because they needed 2 scores. They would have gotten a score. They were right there. But, I don't know how Brock felt about that, about that whole discussion. But he seemed to be open-minded to it. But I think Shanahan was verbally scolding him for not taking the sack there and just told him, hey, you need to take the sack there. That was points. That was the game, or at least the game would have continued from that point if we had gotten the field goal. And we didn't get the field goal because you felt the pressure and you let it go. But you got to know the situation to take the sack there and kick the field goal. So that would be my guess. What would be your guess?
Well, so here's the thing. Like Kyle says he didn't know we were there. He was kind of whispering. So he knew we were there. He didn't want us to hear.
He does it all the time. He
didn't know media in the post-game press locker room. Okay. And so I'm going to do an impression of what he looked like. We couldn't hear what he was saying, but this is to me what he looked like. And if you're listening on podcast, I'm gesticulating. This is what he looked like. A lot of throwing his hands up. And then Purdy, this is what Purdy looked like. Just a lot of nodding his head. I mean, one guy looked kind of like frustrated, as would be an understatement. And the other guy looked like, I'm not going to say humiliated, but like a guy who was, getting criticized in front of people, and that's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
That's what it looked like to me.
I think you probably pegged it. I mean, I think we probably guessed right. He probably was talking to him about the last turnover, and it was like, "Hey, man, you can't do that. You can't throw that pick there. You have to take the sack there. You can't turn it over there." So that would be my guess. That'd be my guess.
Have you ever seen Kyle do that?
I have seen him sit down there.
I've seen him sit down there after wins. I've seen him sit down with Nick Mullins there and kind of put his arm around the guy, like, man, go over the good plays. But after a loss, to walk right in there and then tell people like, "Oh, I didn't know you were watching." It's like, ooh, I don't know about that. You're also the guy who made that big deal about Brandon Ayuk's shorts in front of the media. It seems like you kind of like getting dramatic sometimes. I don't know. I think he didn't know we were there.
At the end of the day, I don't think Kyle Shanahan gives a shit. I don't think he cares. I don't think he cares if he does it in front of us or if it's behind the scenes. Would he rather have it be behind the scenes? Sure. But he's okay. He's okay. I think Brock has got mental maturity of like the Alex Smith level. So he's a very bright, mature guy. And he's also very accountable. I will say this. I mean, Brock doesn't dodge. He doesn't dodge.
Well, do you think he cares that Kyle did that publicly instead of privately?
I think if you asked him, I bet you he would prefer that he didn't do that privately, but I don't think it's a deal breaker or something that I'd be shocked if Brock, who's kind of an old school guy and a very kind of like I can take it kind of a guy. I think he's probably okay with it. I don't know that I would have been okay with it, but I don't think I would have been
okay with it either.
Brock's a lot more confident than I am, probably.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so you said Brock Purdy had about 6 or 7 passes that could have been intercepted in this game. Yep. It was really one of the, if not worst, performances of his career. Has his price tag gone down? We all know he's going to be eligible for an extension next year, and the going rate for top of the line quarterbacks is now $60 million a year. Is his price tag going down?
I don't know. I don't think I'd be comfortable paying him that much. So in my mind, I'd like to pay him less. As far as has his price tag went down, I mean, it just seems like whoever's up gets a huge amount of money. Huge amount of money. I mean, Derek Carr got $44 million. So I still think he's going to get north of 40, maybe even north of 50. But I would like to try to get him around 40 to 45. I mean, maybe even less. If I could get him for 35 or 40, maybe I'd like to do that. I don't know how these things get metered out as far as, is it, I don't know what Kyle Strongton, Purdy's agent would ask for. He's got an agent out of Nashville. I don't know that much about him, but I saw his name. My guess is he's going to ask for $50 million. That'd be my guess. And
I would imagine he would too.
He's had a great year. And you know what? The one thing I will say about this is that it's really easy. It's really easy to always point to the head of the snake when other things are wrong. I mean, the offensive line is, he's running for his life. He has to run more. His receivers aren't getting separation. They're not very dynamic. The defense is not bailing him out. The special teams is a circus. So the Niners' winning equation is breaking down around Brock, and it just heaps that much more pressure on him. We're forcing him to do more. So is he still having a great year? Yeah, he's still having a great year. Do I think he's an outstanding player? Yeah, I do think he's an outstanding player. Would I want to pay him $60 million, like the cutting edge at the top? Not if I could avoid it. I'd rather pay him 35 to 40, to be honest.
Is he having a great year, though? I mean, he's 3-4. His quarterback rating is 91. He has 9 turnovers in 7 games. Is he having a great year?
I mean, you had people on ESPN saying last week that the Chiefs coaching staff were suggesting he's an MVP of the league. He had significantly better air yard stats than Mahomes coming into this game. I mean, he had played at a pretty high level. I think
Mahomes isn't having a good year either.
No, but I mean, you're talking about Mahomes. You're talking about the very best player in the game. He had better stats than Mahomes. I mean, does he have the best stats of any quarterback?
20 quarterbacks have better stats than Mahomes this year.
Yeah, I mean, there's a number of guys. I'm just saying I thought Purdy was having a very good year. You got to remember what's going on around him. He hasn't had CMC. It's impacted their red zone. He's running more than ever before, but I think at times he's running really smartly. I kind of think the 49ers would be in a much worse position without Brock Purdy.
I don't know. Going back and watching the game and listening to Tom Brady talk about him, he did not seem impressed with Brock Purdy at all. He used the word average to describe him repeatedly. I don't know. I mean, it's not just this season. Like last 12 games, he's 6-6 with a quarterback rating of 87. Like that's as average as it gets.
I mean, ultimately, he's the quarterback you got. You got somebody better? If you got somebody better,
I'm not saying they should trade him right now, but yeah. I'm wondering,
would you bring him back next year as the quarterback? I would.
I would bring him back next year as a quarterback, but the question is, would you extend him this offseason? I don't think I would.
You want to just let him stew?
You got to make that decision. You got to see how the year plays out before you make that decision. But right now, I'm wondering, like, is that necessarily a fait accompli that they're just going to say, let's extend you? Or they might say, you know what? This last year was not up to your standard. Let's see one more.
I mean, going into this game, his numbers were pretty freaking good. There were a number of them too. I mean, he was like first or second in a bunch of categories. So I don't know that I can sit there and just be like one bad game against the Chiefs when Ayuk wasn't there, Deebo wasn't there, CMC wasn't there, and he didn't play
well against
Pearsall.
The Cardinals.
But I mean, what do you think?
What
do you think of him?
17th in quarterback rating, below Justin Fields and Jalen Hurts and Joe Flacco and Sam Darnold.
Was he not top 5 in like most categories?
David has a bunch of incredible advanced stats that will tell you that Brock Purdy's the best quarterback in the world. I'm just looking at old school stats. I don't know. Look, the way I privately feel, and this is going to take us into our last topic. I want to see Brock Purdy with the new coach. I feel like his dip in numbers are the same thing happened to Jimmy Garoppolo. I feel like this is a Kyle thing. And I feel like not only does Kyle
get highest rated quarterback coming. He was PFF's highest rated quarterback in the NFL coming into
in that case,
this game.
PFF.
I mean, either PFF's a joke or we're judging him a little too harshly off this loss. So,
well, hold on. I'm not saying that I'm judging him harshly. I still think he's good. What I'm saying is I want to see him with a new coach. I'm tired of Kyle. He did this to Jimmy, and he's going to do it to Brock again. He kills quarterbacks' confidence because he's so negative. So my question is, would you be interested in if the Niners miss the playoffs or don't win a playoff game, getting that offensive coordinator from Detroit who just put 31 on the Vikings, who own Kyle Shanahan? What do you think, Ben Johnson or Kyle Shanahan moving forward?
I like Ben Johnson. I'm a fan of Ben Johnson. I mean, I know a lot about Ben Johnson. He was a walk-on at North Carolina. He got beat out by TJ Yates. He started his coaching career at Boston College as a grad assistant. Then he spent 7 or 8 years in Miami. Then he's kind of worked his way up in Detroit. He's considered Zach Taylor, the head coach of the Bengals, says that he's brilliant. But he's not just like he's not some guy who just memorized someone's scheme. He seems legitimately creative. Yeah. I mean, they say his offensive system is influenced by Mike Martz, Darrell Bevell, Adam Gase, Clyde Christensen. Sure. Here's where they are. I mean, Detroit is second in total offense. They're second in points per game. They're second in passing offense. The Niners, by comparison, are third in total offense. The Niners, by comparison, are 9th in points per game. And look what he's doing with Goff. He's doing a better job with Goff than McVay ever did. I don't think so this is just a difference of opinion. I don't think the greatness in Detroit is Ben Johnson. I don't. I think the greatness in Detroit is Brad Holmes, I believe, the general manager who came from the Rams, because look at their personnel. They've gone right down the lists. Laporta's as good as any receiver going. They got Montgomery. They've got Gibbs. They've got, maybe the best young offensive line in the sport, led by Penei Sewell. I look at the Lions revival as Brad Holmes, a great personnel guy, came from the Rams and has systematically checked boxes, and they're just drafting awesome. Brian Branch, Aiden Hutchinson. Some of these picks are, like a Bosa. Like Aiden Hutchinson was the second pick in the draft. But if you said to me, I like Ben Johnson. I think Ben Johnson's a good coach. If the Niners decided they were going to move off of Kyle Shanahan and hire Ben Johnson, I think that would be a good name to replace him. But do I think that Ben Johnson is like the end all be all? No, I think the end all be all in Detroit is Brad Holmes. I think that he has gone there and they have awesome talent. And I think that ultimately that like Brett Veach has done a much better job than John Lynch over the last 7 or 8 drafts. I think Brett Veach and Taub and Spags and around the people around Reed are.
But the question isn't whether Ben Johnson is the end all be all. It's just the question is, do you think he could do a better job with this quarterback and this team than Kyle's done?
I don't think. I think the key to the Lions is their personnel. I mean, was Goff?
The Niners have pretty good personnel. Look at this draft where they knocked it out of the park. They have a very good scouting department. Precedes John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan.
I don't know if I'd call it a very good scouting department. The Niners' first-round picks in this they've invested 7 draft number 1 picks.
Well, those might have been Kyle's picks.
Javon Kinlaw, Mike McGlinchey, Reuben Foster, and Solomon Thomas. Those 5 players
might have been Kyle's picks.
7 number 1s. They've only had 9 number 1s. The only other number 1s are Bosa, who was the second pick in the draft. He literally drafted himself. And Pearsall, who yesterday got 1.9 yards of separation.
That was Kyle's pick.
I'm just saying, I don't know whose pick they were, but the Niners personnel is the reason I think the Niners are eroding. You can't miss. They've only been there for 9 number 1s. You can't miss on 7 number 1s out of 9 and maintain this awesome roster. I mean, I like Lynch. I'm a Lynch fan, but come on. I mean, it's the players. If Kyle had better players, I think he'd be better. I think Johnson's got really great players. I mean, I can make an argument that Laporta's the best receiving tight end, that Montgomery and Gibbs are the best tandem running backs, that Amon-Ra and Jamison Williams really fit together. They've got Penei Sewell and Taylor Decker and Frank Ragnow. They get the makings of the best offensive line. I mean, I like the Lions personnel. Brian Branch, stud. Aiden Hutchinson, stud. I mean, I like what Brad Holmes has done there. But I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that
players. The Niners were just favored to beat the Chiefs by like 1.5 points. It seemed like the odds makers thought that the Niners roster was pretty good, and they lost by 10, and it could have been more. I think the biggest disparity in that game was between Andy Reid and Kyle Shanahan. I think it's bigger than the players. I think it's the coaches. And you mentioned like what are Schneider and Sorensen doing on this team? Like that's the best Kyle can do. Harbaugh could do a whole lot better than that. I'd like to know could Ben Johnson bring Robert Saleh back? I'm sure Kyle could.
I mean, I guess I'd have to know more. Like you tell me if Ben Johnson's coming here, who's going to be the GM? Does he have final say on personnel?
Keep John Lynch. I would keep John Lynch.
Is John Lynch going to be happy with parting from Kyle Shanahan? I mean, I don't know that Shanahan is the problem. I think that the lack of players is the problem. They are slow. The 49ers are a slow team on the perimeter. Very slow. You don't think the O-line's great. The D-line's regressed. You just told me Bosa is the most overrated player. The linebackers are Fred Warner and just guys. I mean, the big bad Niners have evaporated before our eyes. They don't have nearly the talent that they've had at any point in this regime. They have backslid talent-wise. You can't have an entire draft of Ty Davis-Price, Danny Gray, Drake Jackson. I mean, they literally have blown.
Who wanted those guys, though? But we can't sit here and act like Kyle has no say on personnel.
I don't know. Do you know who has say? I don't know.
We know that Kyle Shanahan has say on personnel.
But I mean, I can't tell you this was Kyle's guy, that was Lynch's guy, this was Lynch and Kyle's guy. That was Kyle didn't want
to
that.
act like Kyle's just the head coach and he's been given these players and they've failed him. It's like, no, he's involved in every decision.
Kyle is responsible for it all. So I guess if you want to hold his feet to the fire, it's fair because he was hired first. He's making all the money. Lynch was hired under him. It's all Kyle's fault.
He's involved in the decision-making process and he has the final say.
But I don't know if he made those picks or if he deferred. I don't know. I don't know if the Niner personnel department is bad or if Kyle, I think there's a very good chance that Kyle wanted Joe Williams, wanted Dante Pettis, wanted Jalen Hurd, wanted CJ Beathard.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
All in the first couple rounds.
Uh-huh.
And for those offensive players who were obviously all busts, those Kyle has to take responsibility.
Correct.
But as far as why is Detroit having a renaissance? I'll credit Brad Holmes. Now, I'm not saying that Ben Johnson wouldn't be a great coach. I mean, he might be a great coach. And you know what? There's a weird vibe around this Niner team all year. Kyle seems exhausted. Lynch seems exhausted. It feels like there's a vibe around the team that like we don't know the real story. Like there's some backstory as far as the relationship between Jed or like what Jed's told these guys or what their expectations are. I get the feeling that we don't really know. Like we're going to find out at the end of this year what the score is inside the building. And I feel like I'm on the outside looking in on that. That's how.
Well, your take with this team with Brock just now is that he's having a great year, but the infrastructure around him is letting him down. Well, to me, that's Kyle's.
Well,
that's Kyle's infrastructure. Well. And if that's how you feel, I won't necessarily dispute it. I like Brock a lot, and I think his degraded numbers probably are a function of Kyle Shanahan's system getting certain coaches figuring out just to use man-to-man coverage and how to beat him. So I would like to see Brock before he's traded or given an extension or either extreme with the new coach. I just feel like, yes, Brad Holmes is doing great, but you cannot deny what Ben Johnson has done with Jared
we do Goff. This every time. We do this every single time. We claim that, hey, we're not going to be knee-jerk, and then they lose one game and we're firing the coach. They've been in the Final Four. Now, granted, in football, there is no Final Four. But we in college basketball, hey, if you make it to the Final Four, you're a star. Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch have made it to the Final Four a lot. So that means there's a lot of coaches and general managers that aren't as accomplished as they are. So I don't know that we can sit here every time and say, hey, we're not going to go knee-jerk, and then they lose a game. We're firing the coach and we're running the quarterback out. I just think I'm not saying that there's no argument for it. And I'm willing to listen to an argument for it. I'm not Kyle Shanahan's stepbrother, or you know what I mean. I'm not related to him. I'm not related to Lynch. I'm not related to Purdy. It's not like my brother-in-law. I'm open-minded to listen to anybody who says that, you know what, Kyle's not the guy. I know people who are in football who told me initially, Kyle Shanahan is going to jerk you guys off forever, and you're never going to win shit. And I've had people who told me that in 2017 when they hired him. So, I mean, I've always had this kind of like, well, I don't know. I'm not really sure. He's gotten some results, though, and they haven't won the Super Bowl. But once again, Reed, hired in 99, wins his first Super Bowl in 2019. So it took 21 seasons.
But he had to go to a different team, and it wasn't necessarily guaranteed that he was going to figure it out with the Eagles. Yeah. And my question is, despite all the good things that Kyle Shanahan has done in the past, if he misses the playoffs this year and the Niners miss their Super Bowl window with this particular roster and these vets that were very expensive, I mean, how do you not?
There's no excuse.
Like, how does your mind not wander to like, well, could Bill Belichick do a better job with this?
I mean,
great. You know what I'm saying? Like, is Kyle really the best? No one could do a better job with this roster. Like, it's very expensive. We're not rebuilding. I mean, I don't understand. But again, they haven't missed the playoffs yet. They may go on a run like they have each of the last 3 seasons.
What you just said changes the dynamic dramatically on today. Today, they have a great chance to win the NFC West.
Sure.
If somehow they miss the playoffs, and that means that means either the Rams, the Seahawks, or the Cardinals won the division instead, they will have lost the division to a subpar team. And at that point, I think you do have to have everything on the table from the evaluation of Lynch, Purdy, Shanahan, everybody.
Sure. I agree. But we're not there yet. We're so far from there.
That's a big one.
Okay, I agree with that.
Like, we're not there yet, right? But if they miss the playoffs, that means that Seattle was better, or Arizona or the Rams. Those teams are all less talented, and if those teams make the playoffs and win this division over the Niners, everything, including the future of Shanahan, Lynch, Purdy, all of it has to be evaluated again.
Well, I think what's scary for the Niners right now is the injuries are mounting, and the schedule is brutal. It's freaking brutal. I mean, like, we assume they're going to beat the Cowboys, but the Cowboys beat the Steelers, and the Niners haven't beaten a team as good as the Steelers. So you can't just assume the Niners are going to beat anyone. Then they got the Bucks after a bye week. They could win that, but that's on the road. Then they have the Seahawks. They should win that. Then after that, they got Green Bay, Buffalo. Like, this is no joke. You got the Bears, who are improving. You got Rams toward the end of the year. They could be healthy by then. Like, it's a tough one. It's a gauntlet.
Well, I'll tell you the one that nobody's talking about is Tampa. I mean, Tampa is scoring points at a level right now, and the 49er offense just had 12 points until the last garbage drive. 12 points at home on a bright sunny day on the West Coast with no wind, no snow, no rain, no conditions. 12 points.
Yep. John Muniz says that's BS. Larry said they would make the playoffs on road and make the Super Bowl last night.
No,
Calling
I said
you out.
No, what I'm saying is the 49ers are going to the playoffs. I think. I really believe that because I think they're going to win this division. And once they get into the playoffs, last year they had the first seed. They got Green Bay and Minnesota, the Green Bay and Detroit. They played terrible. They played terrible in those games, and they still went to the Super Bowl. So I'm just saying, if you put them in the playoffs against these NFC teams, I don't look at the other NFC teams and go, no way, man. The Niners can't go to Minnesota and beat them. I think they can. Niners can't go to Green Bay and beat them. I think they can. I think the Niners can go on the road and beat any of the contending teams in the NFC. So all I'm saying is just get into the playoffs. And some years you're going to be the 1 seed, and other years you got to win on the road. Harbaugh and Kaepernick went into Atlanta. They went into Green Bay. They won on the road. It can be done. I'm just saying they're not done because they're not going to be the 1 seed or the 2 seed, or they're going to have to play the entire playoffs on the road. They're not done. They're still alive.
Blood Moon says let Brock fully loose and call his audibles plays. That's never going to happen. Alex Falone says Larry Grant, which head coach would you hire if Kyle Shanahan gets fired? Would you bring back Salas DC? This was left a half an hour ago. Alex, I hope we answered your question. Larry's not there yet. I'm fully there. Thomas Coates
and you're saying Ben Johnson.
I like Ben Johnson. I think that you want an offensive coach. Look what you want a guy who's shown that he can really take a quarterback that people have written off, someone you would think as average, and make him elite. I think he's shown he can do that. And I love all of his trick little plays. To me, it's very Andy Reid-esque. It's not that he, I don't want Bobby Slowick. I don't want a guy who knows Kyle. I don't want knockoff Kyle to replace Kyle. That's ridiculous to me. You got to go in a different direction if you're going to go in a different direction. And that guy's having success coach. Where Kyle's had failures.
If it was my choice, I'd want McVay.
McVay?
I think McVay is the great offensive coach in the league.
If he was just
if he was a free agent out of LA, I'd want McVay.
Sure. I think he's quite good. Brock Purdy looked overrated yesterday, said Thomas Coates.
He had a bad day.
We did most overrated. We didn't go there. PFF.
Well, I don't think he's overrated because there's an awful lot of people that are walking around saying he's not this and he's not that. So, I think if there was a little bit more of a universal high rating.
Yeah, it's a split with the Brock Purdy discourse. Greg Vento says, how does Mustafa hit stick running backs and tight ends but get trucked by Mahomes? Tell me it's because the rule changed. That was strange.
It's just an angle, and he hit him, and Mahomes had the angle. But I'll tell you, Mustafa will absolutely step up into the hole and smoke people.
Fluke says Grant and Larry could adopt me. Wow.
Kings fan.
Fish and Chip says nominate the person to take Kyle Shanahan into a corner and chat. Oh man, my dad. Steady123 says Sharp on Nightcap read your tweet about Brock. LOL. Really? Shannon Sharp?
What was the tweet?
I don't know. What was it? Was it about Andy Reid being in his? No, I don't know what it was about Brock. What was it about Brock? I need to know. Rafael Flores says Ricky was getting open. BCB did not look his way.
Raphael, the numbers say he got 1.9 yards of separation.
Charlie Sinclair says Larry thinks Purdy is better than Herbert. Herbert makes $52 million, so Purdy should make at least $55 million. Belichick
I do think he's better than Herbert.
You do?
I do.
What? Hey, Grant.
I mean, Herbert's better now with Harbaugh. Herbert's big, strong, fast. He doesn't win games.
Hey, Grant, what's the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. Good question. Bill Kennedy says, remember when the Niners used to beat up teams? Opposing teams used to lose the week after playing the Niners. That's a good point. Was that 2-3 years ago? 3 years ago.
Yeah, it was 2 years ago, I think, when the Niners, the teams that played them lost every time the week after they played them. But they're no longer that team. That's the thing. I mean, there used to be an intimidation factor about the 49ers. The Niners had a swagger. The Niners don't have the same swagger that they had pre-Super Bowl.
Nope. Did Jen says, Grant, who did Ben Johnson blow a lead to? Remind me. Kyle Shanahan in the Super Bowl, in the NFC Championship game. But to be fair, they did score 31 points on the line. It's not like he didn't necessarily do his job. But
he's
that's
an
a good
offensive
point.
guy.
Yeah. Fish and Chip says, we hired a head coach who just needs a field goal to win a Super Bowl 28-3. A field goal. That's true. It's true. Rodman Sanchez says, stop calling Kyle Shanahan genius. He can't beat man coverage. It's tricky. John Muniz says the vibe is everyone.
Kyle can't beat man coverage, or Kyle can't find a receiver who can beat man coverage. Last I checked,
Andy Reid was finding ways to beat man coverage yesterday with screens and rub routes and Noah Gray trickery. There's things you can do schematically. Crossing routes, rub routes, pick plays. John Muniz, the vibe is everyone is tired of Kyle's BS. Oh, well, I'm just getting. I'm loving it. There's an awful
lot of people, and Grant, you're probably leading the charge on this. To be honest,
I didn't do anything.
There's an awful lot of people who want Kyle out.
Hey, man, I'm just a voice of the people. I'm not leading nothing. Not nothing. Yeah. Roger Morales says the league is caught on to Kyle. Same thing with McVay. That's why you got to cash the Super Bowl ticket when you get the chance. It does seem like the best offenses in the league this year aren't necessarily coming from the Shanahan tree this year.
Well, we haven't even discussed that. Why? What was the impetus for the change? Why did the 49ers, who last year had the best play-action quarterback in football, this year have the best play-action quarterback in football? Why did they eliminate the play-action game almost entirely for a downfield passing game out of the shotgun 85% of the time? Why?
Well, Chris Forster answered that question. I asked him, like, why won't you do play-action when these defenses put 6 on the line? And he's like, we don't feel comfortable with it. He said we don't feel comfortable with it because we want our offensive line to fire off the ball aggressively on a run action. And if there's 4 on the line, you can get that double team on one of the linemen. And if there's 5 or 6 one-on-one blocks, they're feeling 1 or 2 of those guys are going to get beat and the quarterback's going to get hit. They don't feel comfortable calling play action against those looks, which is unfortunate because all you got to do is put 5, 6 on the line. The Niners will check to a drop back pass. Seriously.
Seems like a pretty dramatic change in the offense in a very short amount of time.
I agree. Shady Luke says, to be fair, Reid left and Andy Reid had a clock management issue and has fixed that. Also,
no, he didn't. He had a quarterback issue. He had Donovan McNabb. He sucked, or he was never
Shady
the best
Luke is a diehard Eagles fan, so I would defer to him on Eagles matters. Also, he would get it for nothing. Hold on, he would get it for not running. Look at him now. Kyle seems too confident to take criticism and make the change. Also, he would get it for not running. That's true. When Andy Reid was on the Eagles, people would talk about him not running the ball enough, and he would always argue like, well, these screen passes are like an extension of my running game. Now, every time he faces the Niners, the Chiefs outgain them on the ground. Shady Luke.
Where are Niner fans going to be, though, if the Niners kiss off Shanahan and he goes somewhere and wins 3 rings?
Well, he'd have to beat Andy Reid to do that, and I don't think he's ever going to do that.
But I mean, that's what Andy Reid did. He hadn't won. He was getting roasted. 13 years in, they said bye Andy. He goes to Kansas City, gets Mahomes. He's built a dynasty. And the Eagles have Sirianni.
Maybe next time Patrick Mahomes is available in the draft, Kyle Shanahan won't pass on him. Next time, Danny D says Brock seemed timid and didn't use his legs enough. Steve Spagnuolo with a masterclass scheme of stacked boxes, stunt packages, and disguised blitzes. Also, killed him with praise before the game, man. Said he had no weaknesses. That was devilish. Bill Belichick used to do stuff like that. It's like, oh, I'm that good? Got to do that. Smart.
Quarterback has no weaknesses.
None. Absolutely none. That was just masterclass. Fish and Chip says players bail out Lil Shanny every year. It's obvious. Jermaine Pickett, member for 37 months. Thank you, Jermaine. Maitland says, I want Kevin O'Connell or McFleur. They're taken. John Muniz says Operation Tank the season. Gizmo Maltese says next year we bring back Salah and restock. Maybe. Easy Tino says, which version of Kyle sent 71 Trent into motion on Green Bay to collapse the defensive line? Where did that coach go? Miami, you can tell me something is missing. I agree. Like, where are those little flourishes of creativity that we used to see with the 49ers and you currently see with Denver and Kansas City? Those little play designs where you're like, oh, Kyle had fun with this one. I feel like you don't see those as much anymore.
The play that I loved from, was it last year, was, remember when Brock was in Seattle and he faked to the left, faked to the right, and then went right down the middle and it was wide open? I think we've seen glimpses of great play calling, like the Juwan Jennings touchdown in LA, I thought was a phenomenal call. But we're not seeing a lot of creative wrinkles. And more than anything, their equation is bogging down all over the place. I mean, and the one thing that's so annoying watching yesterday is that Reed can do it with anybody. He can do it with Carson Steele. He can do it without Pacheco. He can do it without Juju Smith-Schuster. He can do it without Tyreek Hill. He can make it all work without the players. I feel like Kyle needs a stacked deck with great players to make it work.
Steady123 says it was your Kyle tweet about him talking to Purdy. Cool. Ben Span, $1. Thank you. Belichick 2025 says, Larry, how many times does Kyle get to fall short before the fan and organization deserve a change?
Well, but here's the thing. Don't make change for the sake of making change. That was called, let's get rid of Jim Harbaugh. Oh, yeah, well, we'll just hire, I don't know, anybody. Tom Sula. He's pleasant. Oh, that didn't fucking work. Well, then we'll bring in Chip Kelly. He's innovative. Oh, but he wasn't innovative. So then all of a sudden you go down this road and it takes you 3 or 4 years. Do you really? I mean, I'm fine with moving on from Shanahan if you have a good plan. If you don't have a good plan, if it's like we're going to fire him and then we're going to start doing interviews, I don't believe it.
If you're right about Brock Purdy and he's a great quarterback, wouldn't like all the top offensive coaches want to come to this team, like Ben Johnson?
Well, possibly, but maybe not, because the Niners just signed Ayuk for the next couple of years at big dollars, and he's not going to be anything. And they've got all kinds of dead cap coming, and Deebo's old, and Kittle's old, and Juszczyk's old, and the line needs rebuilding, and the defense isn't any good. You know, I don't know. I'm not sure if this is as attractive a job as it may have been.
That's a good point.
Even a year.
I agree with that. Justin Lomker says, good thing Mustafa looked amazing. Fluke says, Kings are winning the chip this year. Haters. On the real, though, I watch both you guys every day, and I appreciate y'all's work. Have a great day, Larry and Grant. Appreciate you, Fluke. Niners fan 03 says, does Reed...
fan, I'll say that, but they ain't winning. They're not winning anything. Come on.
Does Reed have a ring without Mahomes? Probably not.
No.
His team was very good with Alex Smith, but not in the playoffs. Rodman Sanchez says,
yeah, that's actually interesting. Yeah, they may have had one ring with that. They may have gotten it done without. I mean, Reed's so impressive, but I would say no.
Alex Smith led the league in passer rating his last season as a starter in Kansas City. That team was good with him. Anyway, Rodman Sanchez says,
it done.
I'm yet to see Kyle Shanahan beat a top 5 defense. It seems like the top defensive coordinators kind of have his number. Jacob Anthony says, do the opposite of what Grant says. Too emotional. Appreciate it. Thank you. I am emotional. I know you love it. So thanks for watching, everyone. We got 5,000 people in here right now. There's a lot going on with the 49ers. Our heart goes out to Deebo Samuel. Hope you're okay. My goodness, I had no idea it was this serious. Hope you're all right. Take your time. It's going to be interesting to see what happens this week. We've got a lot of injury issues to monitor. Niners are off tomorrow, and then they have practice on Wednesday. Make sure you like and subscribe the stream, my channel, Larry's channel. I'm sure you guys already do, but if you do it again and like the stream again and tell one friend about how handsome Larry is, and me too. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.